There are a bunch of brave souls that came on Thursday afternoon to come see this, and I'm really happy you're here. Welcome to the session. I hope reInvent has been amazing for you so far. It's been pretty amazing for me. I've had a tremendous number of conversations with a lot of you, and it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. My name is Wayne Duso, and I head up AWS's file services, data transfer services, and a few new initiatives and services that we actually didn't announce at reInvent this year. We're going to hold those ones back maybe for a few more weeks and give you all something to think about post reInvent. Yesterday, Andy talked a lot about storage innovations. This has been an amazing conference for us with respect to the things we've done with our storage services. And what I'm going to focus in on here today are the innovations, the releases that we did, the launches that we did for services related to file and file storage. But first, a little bit of a disclaimer. Standing up in front of all of you doesn't really make me nervous, but it's not my most fun thing to do. I'd rather listen to you than talk at you. So what we're going to try to do here today is get through the basic services that we have in the concepts. We also have a special guest that's going to join us and talk to us about his company's journey to AWS and all-in journey to the cloud. But I want to leave some time at the end because this is more of a survey session to take whatever questions you may have. So, and if you don't have questions, I'll ask a few myself and answer them myself. And then we'll move on. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to walk through our AWS file storage, file system, file transfer, and hybrid file storage services. And I'm also super excited to have a customer with us here today that's going to talk about their journey to the cloud and how they used the services that we're going to talk about to make that journey happen. I think you'll find this very interesting. So we've got a lot to cover. So let me jump in. So the service teams have been super busy in the last year since last reInvent, and we had a ton of exciting announcements. I mean, a ton of exciting announcements that were made yesterday, and I want to review some of those with you here today. But before I do that, I want to say thank you for all of the thought partnering, and business that you've afforded us over the last couple of years. AWS Storage has grown tremendously, and I want to thank you for that. We've seen customers from virtually every industry and size adopt both EFS and Storage Gateway. Customers like BBC, LoanLogix, Celgene, Adobe, Airbnb, Pinterest, and the Weather Company, just to name a few. And all of these companies are leaders in their industries, and they've all chosen AWS as their journey to the cloud. And in just a few short years, EFS has grown and has been adopted by tens of thousands of customers. Every day we manage hundreds of thousands of file systems on behalf of those customers, which contain hundreds of billions of files. And that's just in a couple of years. So it's a really amazing adoption story by a lot of customers. And Storage Gateway has been used to build hybrid solutions for customers, tens of thousands of customers, and on a daily basis is moving and processing petabytes of storage on your behalf. These incredible numbers for services that have been out just for a few years. So AWS has been helping customers on their journey to the cloud for almost 13 years. And in that time, companies like General Electric have moved 9,000 applications from on-prem into AWS. Companies like Netflix have architected their entire infrastructure onto AWS. And companies like Pinterest started on AWS, and they continue their journey with us. And frankly, all of the input we get from all of you and all of those customers really drives about 90 to 95% of what we do and what we deliver. You all are fundamentally the drivers of all the innovation that you see here at the show and what we do during the year. And I wanted to provide or share some observations, especially in the file space with you in terms of how people make that journey onto the cloud. And it's really important for the spaces that I'm here representing today, because many of my customers, many of you, are enterprise customers. Right? Things like file systems are at the core of what you do and the core of your applications. And so these patterns really apply, all of them really apply to customers like yourself. So for instance, the first pattern I'd like to talk about is rehosting. And this is a pattern that a lot of companies engage from the get-go. Generally, it means taking their virtual machines or their applications in some form and bringing them onto AWS, putting them on an EC2 instance, perhaps putting some EBS storage behind them, and just running them. Right? And this is, in many ways, we often call it a do-it-yourself implementation for these services. And companies like GE that moved those 9,000 applications to AWS, a lot of that started very quickly. They had a goal of moving 30 applications in 50 days. That's pretty aggressive. And with that kind of leadership thought, they leveraged a lot of the rehosting patterns in order to do that. Now, you also have the opportunity to re-platform. And what re-platform, by and large, means is that you take your application to AWS, but you leverage some of the services on AWS so that you don't have to maintain infrastructure, even in the form of EC2 and EBS, as I said in the previous example. So for instance, if we were in the database space, if you were rehosting, you might take some EC2 instances, you might put MySQL on top of those, and you might operate those. But you could, when you re-platform, just simply bring your application and start using RDS and let us take care of all of the heavy lifting, if you would, of managing and maintaining that infrastructure. And so that's an example of re-platforming. With a service like EFS, very, very similar. If you have an application that relies on file or file systems, your ability to bring your application and place it on top of a POSIX compliant file system like EFS and simply start operating, not worrying about the infrastructure, but focusing in on your business logic, your business application, you can get going much quicker with a lot less energy and a lot less worry in terms of what you need to do for infrastructure. And the last pattern I wanted to bring up is re-architecting. So in re-architecting, sort of like re-platforming, you're leveraging more and more of the services that we have to offer. And as an example, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, there are companies, FINRA being a good example, that it's a regulatory company, and part of what they have core to their business is a fraud detection application, which had been written for on-prem years before they made their journey to AWS. But when they made that journey, they decided in that particular case, in order to achieve the agility and the scale that they would require, it made sense for them to re-architect their application for AWS, and they did not go through the re-hosting or re-platforming phases. Now, these are all, whether it's GE or whether it's FINRA, these are all interesting and good examples of companies that have made their journey to the cloud using one of these patterns. And what's even more important is that these are not mutually exclusive. It all depends on which applications you're bringing and where you are in your journey. Often many of these are used at the same time. Okay, so that's the preamble. Now, I'm assuming, because you're all here, you all have some sort of file systems or files of some sort in your life. And we did title the session Got Files. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that All of you have files, and perhaps you have a lot of files. Now, it's a tautology that every business has files in some form, and hopefully it's not exactly like this, even though some days it may seem like it looks like this for you. We're here to help with that. But what we do know is that file storage is growing because file data is core to many of your business applications. And every day we see customers across virtually every industry building innovative file-based applications and solutions on AWS. And businesses of every type use file storage for their business mission-critical and business-critical applications, as well as for their big data compute-intensive applications. So in fact, unstructured data makes up the vast majority of companies' storage footprint today. And those may exist in the form of files, they may exist in the form of objects, or in even many cases in the form of databases. And we all have, personal productivity files. We all create pictures. Some of you are doing it right now as you're taking pictures of these slides, which is awesome. So you're creating lots of, rich media assets. And we have, devices that sit within our labs or our businesses that are generating really big data sets. And, they're created from a myriad of devices. And what many of you have told us and our observations, a lot of your data lives outside the cloud. It lives on-prem, it may live in colos, and in listening to you all, there are all sorts of applications that are siloed in these areas, and they're distributed across a number of locations, often duplicated, undermanaged, and more importantly, undervalued. You're not often getting the value you could out of your data. And that's something we want to help you with as well. So file-based applications, workloads, and storage are broad and deep. Each has its own performance, durability, availability, characteristics, and economics. And to effectively serve, there isn't just one size that fits all solutions. And with cloud-based services and a pay-as-you-go model, there doesn't need to be just one file-based solution for all of your needs. So this year, and specifically this week, is significant in terms of the file-based services options that we are able to deliver to you, our customers. And whether you have, an on-prem implementation that you're looking to bring to the cloud, in a rehosting fashion, or you're, building DIY solutions yourself with us, we can help reduce. With our solutions, we can help reduce the operational burden and the cost with our in-cloud file system services, our file transfer services, and for those of you who are embracing a hybrid strategy, with our hybrid storage solutions as well. All right, so I'm going to cover 3 areas today. I'm going to cover in-cloud file systems. I'm going to cover data transfer services that pertain to files. So we have a lot of data transfer services. I'm not going to cover them all today. And we're also going to cover hybrid storage as it pertains to file. So let me start with file systems. Up till this week, we had one file system service to offer you, and that was EFS, and that was launched in 2016. And in Andy's keynote, he announced the launch of FSx, a service family for providing fully managed third-party file systems to you. So with EFX and FSx, we provide the right tools for the problems that you have and the problems that you've told us about. With EFS, you can easily share across thousands of Linux-based instances a highly scalable, highly reliable, highly durable file system that scales to petabyte scales in hundreds of thousands of IOPS. With FSx for Windows, you can now have a native Windows file system that is hosted on Windows servers that is fully managed for you. It is built on SSD storage and provides you with gigabytes of throughput, provides you with tremendous IOPS and sub-millisecond latencies. And with FSx for Lustre, you have a fully managed service for your compute-intensive workloads. And this is built on a highly popular open source Lustre file system, which is a parallel file system. So, if you have Linux file needs, think about EFS. If you have Windows file needs, think about FSX for Windows. And if you have big data, compute-intensive file needs, I would ask you to take a look at FSX for Lustre. So let's double-click into each of these and just do a little bit of a survey on what they provide. So we launched EFS in 2016 to provide customers with a fully managed service providing simple, scalable, elastic file system for Linux workloads. And EFS is great for a broad range of applications. In fact, what we see is that virtually every industry has applications that do very well on EFS today. And when they need a scalable, elastic, highly durable, highly available file system. It's a great choice for those needs. And this week, we announced the availability of, coming soon, the availability of a new storage class called EFS IA, or Infrequent Access. Today, we have a storage class called EFS Standard Storage Class, and that storage class costs 30 cents per gigabyte month. And it's built on SSD and provides customers with tremendous performance, tremendous throughput. But what we know from listening to you is that a vast majority of your file data over time ages and you don't need to access it as frequently. And at 30 cents, it's a little prohibitive in leaving that data there. So what we've done with EFS IA is to provide a brand new storage class that's priced at 4.5 cents a gig per month. And that storage class is under the same namespace as your file system with standard storage. And in doing so, we provide a lifecycle management policy that after 30 days will move data from standard to IA. And what this does is allows your application to use the data, whether it's on standard or on IA, without ever having to know where that data lives in your file system. So we're very excited, and we're looking forward to bringing this to you in early 2019. Okay, so this was the most requested capability last year at reInvent. When we were talking to people last year, the thing that they said the most is, can you provide us a solution for Windows? And so this week we announced FSX for Windows File Server. And what we've done here is provide you with a fully compatible native Windows File Server on Windows servers, and have taken the burden of having to maintain those, build those, maintain those on AWS, and we've taken that upon us into the service. So no more patching, no more updating, no more managing and administrating any of these capabilities yourself. We take care of this for you. And we're doing this on SSD storage, as I said earlier, so you're getting tremendous throughput, tremendous IOPS, and great scale. FSX for Lustre is a little bit different than what we have for EFS and FSX for Windows, because those file systems are really built for business applications. We were also told last year, though that's all well and good, but for people who have high-performance computing needs, HPC needs, or compute-intensive workloads, can you provide us with a solution that can scale to hundreds of gigabytes per second, millions of IOPS at sub-millisecond latencies, and can you make it super affordable? So this week, we also announced FSX for Lustre, which provides you with those capabilities and a fully managed solution. That with only a couple clicks of a mouse, you can stand up a FSX Lustre file system, connect it to your S3 data lake, and start populating that file system as your application is running. You can run your analysis, you can run your compute-intensive workloads for hours, for weeks, for days, for months, whatever works for you, and then using Lustre's HSM capabilities, which is built into the client, you can write all of that data back to S3, and you can blow the file system away. You can delete the file system so you don't have to maintain that infrastructure when you're not using it. and as soon as you need it again, you just, again, couple clicks of the mouse, or using CloudFormation or some other automation, raise up that file system, it's connected to your S3 bucket, and you can start the process all over again. So we're pretty excited about that. So what's really important here is that in these use cases, customers are looking for, and what you've told us is you're looking for a solution that is fast and cheap, but not necessarily durable because you're not running it for long periods of time. So the source of truth for data using FSx for Lustre is an S3 bucket. It could be another data source. You can use other data sources as well, but the easiest thing is to use part of an S3 bucket or an S3 data lake that you have. And by connecting it to your S3 bucket, we have the ability to populate that file system. We read all the metadata in when that connection occurs, and then we lazy load the data into the file system as your application processes it. So as soon as that file system is created, you can start processing. And as soon as you're done, you can write that data back, you can checkpoint it back, you can fully write it back, and when we terminate the file system for you, we make sure all that data gets back to the source of truth, which is your S3 data lake. Okay, so really what we're talking about this year is we have more choices, and these choices can be used for whatever is the best fit for your application needs. So last year, you told us, I really need a Windows solution. Last year, you told us, I really need a big data, compute-intensive file system solution. And you also told us that as much as you love EFS and as much as you're using it, I want to use it more. I want to be able to put more data in, but not at 30 cents a terabyte, 30 cents a gigabyte, because a lot of my data is not accessed that often. So this year, we delivered 2 file system services, FSx for Lustre, FSx for Windows, and 1 new storage class, EFS-IA. So thank you for that input. It was a lot of fun building these things. All right, so let's shift gears for a minute and talk about file transfer. Moving your data to where it needs to be, easily, fast, and ensuring that it's secure and correct is super important. And AWS provides a myriad of file transfer services depending on what your needs are. But we're really just going to talk about a couple that we launched this week. And specifically, we're going to talk about AWS Data Sync and AWS Transfer for SFTP. Now, customers have built solutions for moving data onto the cloud for a long time with open source solutions and also third-party solutions. But what they did is they came to us and they said, this open source stuff is good, but I don't want to build and maintain and scale that infrastructure. And using third-party capability is also good, but sometimes I just don't want to pay what I have to for those third-party solutions. So what we've done is we've listened to that feedback and we've provided a service which enables you to move your data from any source to any AWS storage service. And with the launch, we've started off by moving file data from on-prem to either EFS or S3. And so this week we announced AWS Data Sync to provide you with those capabilities. It's a fully managed service. It's fully scalable. For instance, if you have a 10 gig pipe and you'd like to fill it up, AWS Data Sync can fill up a 10 gig pipe and move your data into AWS very quickly into S3 or EFS. And it's a pay-as-you-go service, so you pay 4 cents per gig that we move into or move out of AWS, and you pay for no other infrastructure. Now, AWS Transfer for SFTP came to us because in the world of electronic data interchange, or EDI, many of our customers, including insurance companies and banks and so on, have been using the FTP protocol as core to their EDI applications for years, and specifically they use a secure version, SFTP. And when they make their journey to the cloud, this is a core workflow that they need to move in, and they've been doing so by building their own solutions, again, having to maintain that infrastructure, which is not core to what they do, and it's not core to the application that needs that infrastructure. So this week, we've announced this new service, which is a fully managed service, which allows customers to come in with a few clicks of the mouse once again, they can stand up a domain name, yourcompany.sftp. Or sftp.company.com, and with that, we will maintain an SFTP site for you, and all of your data lands in S3, which then allows you to use all of the S3 capability to trigger additional workflows or additional value within AWS. Okay, here's the funny thing. Every single time I tell this story, there is somebody who's so happy, so thank you. Thank you. And also in Andy's keynote this week, some of you may have been happily surprised or maybe even shocked of our announcement of Outpost, which is another step that we have taken into providing customers the right solutions for their hybrid needs. And AWS has continues to deliver these solutions, but for over 5 years, we've offered a solution to help customers build their hybrid storage solutions and enable on-prem applications to seamlessly integrate with AWS storage, and that's been done through the AWS Storage Gateway. And it's for a very long time has been an integral part of our customers' journey to the cloud, whether they're building hybrid storage solutions, cloud bursting applications, they're migrating to the cloud, or they're building cloud-based business continuance solutions. Customers like LoanLogix and Celgene, StemCell, Moderna, and JustGiving all started or accelerated their journey to the cloud by using Storage Gateway. It's kind of the easy button, if you would, for a lot of companies. It's built on standard protocols, so if you have a file need, it supports both SMB and NFS. If you have a volume need, it supports iSCSI volumes, and it even supports iSCSI for VTL tape. And these have been tremendously important for customers in making their journey to the cloud. There are two options that you can use for file-based workloads. One is the File Gateway, which we announced a couple of years ago, and again, supports both SMB and NFS protocols. And Volume Gateway, which a lot of customers will stand up a server in front of and use the iSCSI volume capability to serve their applications. Okay, with all the great services supporting file-based workloads, you may be asking, well, how do these help transform my business? So we're lucky enough today to have Terrell with us from LoanLogix, and he has been not only a pioneer, but a thought partner and an exemplar when it comes to architecting and leading his company on their journey to the cloud. And I won't speak at length on what LoanLogix does. I will leave that up to Terrell, but let me welcome him up to the stage now.
Thank you, Wayne. Good afternoon, reInvent. How is everyone? What happens in Vegas is staying in Vegas, right? Wayne, thanks for letting me participate today and talk a little bit about our journey. So who is LoanLogix and what do we do? So when people ask me, lay people ask me what exactly it is that we do as a company, one of the first questions I ask them right back is if they've seen the movie The Big Short. How many of you have seen the movie The Big Short? Quite a few. So there's 3 or 4 parallel plot lines that take place in that movie. And I actually had to watch the movie 4 or 5 different times just to be able to follow them all and understand what was transpiring. But what the scary part about it is, while they took some creative license in making that movie to obviously make it entertaining, the bulk of that movie, the facts and the plot lines that it talks about, that stuff really happened. And many of us in this room experienced that, whether personally with our own families or friends that we know, and the housing collapse that was precipitated by all of that activity. And then that in turn led to the collapse of the global financial system. So LoanLogix was started in 2013 by the merger of 2 prior existing technology companies with the sole mission to try to prevent what happened in 2008 from ever happening again. So we're what we call a RegTech or regulatory technology company. And in so doing, After the housing crisis, many of the new regulatory bodies like the FHFA and others that the federal government instituted enforced all new regulations on lending institutions of things they had to be compliant with and follow in order to prevent that from happening. So we developed a platform called LoanHD that allows us to point out to those lenders or investors who are buying those pools of loans that you saw talked about in the movie, where the risk and the regulatory risk and issues are in those loans. So how do we do that? We do that by analyzing and classifying via machine learning and data extraction algorithms. As you can see here, millions of documents of mortgage loans a month that we process through our platform. So the name of the session today is called Got Files. Did we have files? We had lots of files. Files, so many that we were quickly running out of things to do with and space to store them. So those numbers just continue to grow hour by hour at LoanLogix. So this is where we started. Initially, we had VMware vSphere replication set up between a hot data centers, one in Atlanta and one in Miami. And that worked well for us for a while as we started the company and got it off the ground. What we quickly ran into in that scenario is our ever-growing storage demands. And really, there were two issues that we were faced with. One, our managed services provider being able to react quickly enough to our needs for picking up the phone, hey, we need new disks in our DAS units. We need new DAS units. And them telling us it's going to be 6 weeks to get the equipment. We didn't have 6 weeks. We had, some case, hours or days. So our first step was to implement the cached volume storage gateway. This allowed us to, our applications are all Java and Red Hat Linux based that process these files. And we need a POSIX NFS-based file system. So we had no time to re-platform or re-architect, unfortunately. So we needed to find a solution that worked with our applications as they were built. So we implemented the storage gateway on-prem in our vSphere cluster. And that allowed our applications to have access to, with very low latency, the most recent and currently accessed files that we're holding in the storage gateway cache in our platform. While at the same time, in the back end, all of that volume and data is being pushed out into volumes at AWS. So this allowed us to get our critical data responsible for our applications over to the cloud. I made the argument internally at our company that, you know what, we can rebuild our application stacks all day long. We can redeploy the applications. If we lose our data, close the doors, we're out of business. So we had to have a way for durable long-term storage of the important data files for our applications. And the storage gateway allowed us to start that journey. After we stood up the storage gateway, any new workloads that we built as a company at that point, and this started in early 2014, we did not deploy any more new workloads on-prem in our managed services data centers. All new workloads started to be deployed at AWS. Our next step, as we started our journey to migrate our applications, was to migrate our MySQL cluster that we had running in our vSphere stack to RDS Aurora. And we've had that in place now for a couple of years and are very, very happy with it. And now, as of May 23rd of this year, as you'll see here on the slide in a moment, we are 100% in the cloud at AWS. It was a little over a 3-year journey. And once we made that jump with all of our applications, we were able to adopt EFS. We were very excited about EFS because even with the storage gateway, there was some concerns about being able to stay on constantly having available storage, but even more so than that, a highly durable storage platform, which EFS brought to the table for us. And as Wayne was talking a moment ago, the EFS IA that was announced this week, as you can imagine with the amount of files that we store, how much of a financial impact that's going to have for us. So we're very excited, and thanks Wayne and the team for introducing that. So where we are today. As you saw for the first few slides, we have what we started with, just a few AWS services. So this is just a small few of the services that we use today. RDS, EFS, API Gateway, S3. We still have some storage gateways running. We're heavy SQS users, Cognito, So we now this is just a few of the. We're probably using at least 60 to 70 AWS services today in our stack. And how did this really help our company? Well, the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, it allowed us to trade CapEx for OpEx. But of course, I'm sure as many of you know, and all of you know, it makes our CFOs' heads explode a little bit trying to adapt to that model. But it's been very beneficial for us. And this is something that we talk about often in our company. Prior to migrating to the cloud, we had our infrastructure teams and our engineering teams. Yeah, they had to work together, but not near to the level that our migrating to the cloud has now facilitated. Our infrastructure teams and our engineering teams are in lockstep now in our DevOps practice every single day. And it's really given us great agility to grow our business in ways that we would never have been able to otherwise with the limitations and constraints we had in running on-prem. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Wayne. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the part of the session that I love the most. One, we're going to provide you with direction on sessions related to these topics that are still to be held. So if you want to take a picture of that, I'll leave it up there for a moment. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you all of the sessions that we had this week pertaining to these topics that are going to be up on YouTube. So take note of the session code, and many of these are already up on YouTube, and you can appreciate some of the depth of story that exists for whether it's EFS, EFSIA, FSX, the variants, data sync, SFTP, or storage gateway. There are a tremendous number of sessions. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 plus sessions. It's about right, about 40 plus sessions that we did. Some of those, if you dedupe them down, probably somewhere in the 30 range for these topics. But with that said, a couple things. I want to make sure that I thank you. I want to make sure we do that. Apparently there isn't a slide. It's further down. Okay. I didn't practice for this particular slide. Please complete your session survey. This is the PSA on your mobile app so that we can get your feedback, because we aren't perfect. We're far from it, and we need your feedback. So it's really, really important. But with that said, this is the part of the session I love the most, which is any question, like, survey level question, 400 level question, 800 level question. It's all good. So with that, anybody want to bravely walk up to the mic? See how I asked you to walk up to the mic? That's awesome. Thank you.
Wayne, great comments here. I've heard a lot about EFS performance, but I haven't heard as much about latency aspects. Can you share some comments on that? Or
I can.
Okay.
I can. So, performance is a topic that is never ending. It is the perennial requirement. Especially in the file system world, and especially given that every workload has a different performance set of needs, whether it's latency or throughput or some other scale factor. So as we move through this year, we've taken made a number of changes to the service, improvements to the service to continue to drive our latencies down. Right now, our latencies, I'm not give you the exact number, doesn't make sense because it depends on your application. But for every file I/O, we're down in the low single-digit latencies today, very low single-digit latencies, and we continue to improve that. We have some improvements that will be coming at the very end of this year that will further improve on what that looks like, and we have targets in the near future that will drop that to sub-millisecond latencies. Good question.
Great. I have a couple of questions. First, as far as the native file system for the EFS and also the Windows version, is it NTFS? And also on the Linux side, what is the actual file system that's running there?
So I just want to make sure I heard the question clearly. It was a little muted. So you're asking what the actual file system is for FSX for Windows?
Correct.
Okay, great. So FSX for Windows is built on Windows Server. We fully manage We take care of manage, administer, provision Windows servers that run Windows file server software, and underneath that is a Windows file system, or NTFS file system, if you would. And so out of the gate, natively, all of the compatibility that you would expect from running a Windows file server or running a Windows server will exist with FSX for a Windows file server. So whatever application you're running today, if you re-platform to use FSX for Windows, you will achieve the level of compatibility right out of the gate. It's fully integrated with AD. It's fully integrated in terms of all of the other features you'd expect from that platform.
And on the Linux side, on EFS, what's the?
So EFS is a POSIX compliant file system that is NFS version 4 and 4.1 based. So any application that you have that runs on or can operate correctly against an NFS mount point using 4.0 or 4.1 should work just fine with EFS. And of course, with any application, we always ask that you test the application to make sure that it works, because applications are tricky things. And if you ever have any challenges with that, all you got to do is reach out and talk to us. One of the things with EFS, it's a highly parallel file system, and so the more multi-threaded your application is, the better performance, the better experience the application will see.
Okay, last question. The maximum IOPS for both of those?
Sure. You're talking about for EFS or for?
Both of them.
Okay. So I don't have the actual maximum IOPS for FSX for Windows. I can get that, but I don't have it. But it's in the 100,000 plus range. I do know that. I just don't have the exact number. For FSX for Lustre, Lustre is a parallel file system built for HPC, so it's millions of IOPS. EFS has two performance modes, GP mode or general purpose mode, max IO mode. In GP mode, every file system can get 7,000 file IOPS a second. In max IO mode, you can drive over 500,000 IOPS a second. And the trade-off that you see is slight increases in IOP latency on max IO, but generally at those levels, people are looking for throughput, then they are absolute lowest latency. Okay? Here.
Sure.
Right
A couple
back
of
to you.
questions. So first of all, about the performance. I tried to launch the Lustre, FX Lustre system. And what I see is that the maximum size of the file system that is supported is 25 terabytes. And the maximum performance I can get is about 5.4 gigabytes a second, which makes it
What was that number again? I just didn't.
5.4 gigabytes a second. That was the
Okay.
maximum number that was specified. So this is very much aligned with a large EFS file system, so I don't see any difference in the performance scale.
Yeah, so I can talk to you offline about that because I'd have to go to the console and figure out if that's a limitation we've set up just on day one. I believe that the 25 is, but that's not what the system's designed for, and we may be just looking at a week one limitation. But let's talk offline. I will make sure I get your information, and we can go from there, because we've tested to hundreds of gigabytes a second and hundreds of terabytes of size. So I know that that's what we do support. We may have put a limiter in there for week one.
I see. Okay.
But thank you. If you've already tested it, thank you.
Well, I didn't provision it. I just tried to see what the limits are.
Well, I appreciate that.
So the other question is, both looking on EFS and the FXS for Windows, it looks like there are many things that customers would expect from the enterprise class NAS are not there. So I can have like snapshots or many other things that people would expect. And that what kind of brings an opportunity for whatever NetApp Cloud Volumes or Infinity.Neutrix or other things. Are there any plans to introduce such features with EFS and Windows?
So in terms of the Windows platform, are there particular features that are missing from the Windows platform that you've recognized so far?
So things like previous versions, for example, on the Windows side.
Okay, and so part of what we do with any of these services when we come on day one is understand what additional capabilities are important to customers. because guessing at what that will be I've been wrong most often. So with respect to EFS, we've heard that snapshots are important, so it's a consideration for us, as well as other enterprise features. And just like the changes that we've made or improvements that we've made this year, whether it was provision throughput or encryption in transit, or today with the pre-announce of infrequent access storage class, we will continuously take that input and make these changes to the service. So I'd be really excited to get your list of things you think are really important. With respect to other enterprise class file systems that you may want to see on FSX, again, FSX was built to be a family of file services for third-party open source or proprietary file systems. So if there are particular file systems that are of interest to you for various reasons, please come talk to us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Wayne. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Both questions that I have are in regards to FSX for Windows. The first question I had was, it leverages SSD. Does it also tier to S3 storage over time?
Again, coming out of the gate, what customers have asked us to provide is a high performance offering for Windows. So we built the offering on SSD in order to provide the throughput and the latencies in the IOPS that were requested. I believe that over time we will get feedback to have perhaps more, if you would, almost like an IA for FSX for Windows. I look forward to getting those requirements once people get, kick the tires.
Okay. And the second question was in regards to encryption in transit. Are you leveraging SMB3, or are you using your own encryption to provide that encryption in transit?
Yeah, so we are leveraging the native Windows capability, and it's really Kerberos that's providing the material to do the encryption.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So hi, I'm from a university, and we have NetApp and Windows clusters doing file service for end users and drive letters and so on. What are the steps for me to take that data and re-platform it up into AWS so that my users don't see any difference? So it's all still the same to them.
Sure. So I just want to make sure I understood the journey that you're trying to start, or you are in the process of going through. So you have NetApp filers on-prem, and you also have Windows file servers that you're using on-prem.
Right.
Okay. And are you looking to run, because NetApp is a partner of ours, and they do have an offering on AWS. Are you looking to leverage that offering, or are you looking to re-platform onto a native AWS service?
Re-platform native.
Okay. And what I need to do is, probably dive a little bit deeper with you on what capabilities you're leveraging on the NetApp platform.
Yeah.
And
Very straightforward, just Windows file service.
okay, so just Windows.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that particular case, you probably would have I'm going to go on a limb and say an amazing experience by re-platforming to FSX for Windows, given that it's a fully compatible native Windows solution. In terms of how you get your data from on-prem in, I think I just saw the GM for data transfer, Asa, who's right back there. She just walked in. That was perfect timing, Asa. And let's have that conversation to see what opportunities exist there based on your needs.
And so do I need the storage gateway as well?
Storage gateway might be the right solution for you. Data sync might be the right solution for you. Snowball might be the right solution for you. So let's have the conversation to figure out what your needs are. Maybe we need to drive a snowmobile up to your building and empty it out. But
So yeah, I'm more worried about how my users from the desktops are going to see this data once it's there.
so let's have that deep conversation.
And then ongoing, how do I back up that data once it's up in the re-platform services?
So FSX for Windows supports backup today. On a file system, you can set a backup capability that will back it up, once a period, whatever that period happens to be, and it essentially takes a snapshot of the data and saves that data off into S3, so it's off of the primary platform and onto a secondary platform.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. These are great questions. See, I told you I like this part of the session a lot more.
Got a couple questions. One's on that SFX for Lester. I was a little bit confused. Is it only supports S3 as the data repository, or is that an optional thing?
So I apologize because I did emphasize the notion of both the re-platforming piece with bringing your Lustre workloads and the re-architecting piece by using S3 as a primary data source or a source of truth for your data. However, you can use other sources of truth for your data and bringing that data into and then writing that data out of your Lustre cluster.
Can Lustre itself be the data repository, or?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we had a lot of conversation about when we built this initial GA offering, based on feedback that we got from customers, was that speed and cost were primary for them. And due to both of those, what we've done is this is not a highly durable solution. It's basically, we're not replicating the data across AZs or producing some other sharded scheme that will protect the data beyond a single copy. And by doing this, it greatly reduces the cost of running these clusters for you. What that does mean is that you need a source of truth that is something other than the cluster itself. So it's really meant for this, hour, day, week, month type of execution before you write the data back or checkpoint the data and then end up terminating the cluster. Okay.
And last question is, so there's the FXX for Windows, there's EFS. Are you worried about, what if we need data to be shared amongst the various use case, or is this kind of sort of creating silos in the cloud?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I would say I worry about it, but I do think about it. And it is really our responsibility to help you manage, your various storage repositories, if you would, your various lakes, if you would. And one of the things that Asa and I talk about as part of solutions that we want to offer is how do you move data to where it needs to be on the best platform. It's much like if you think about lifecycle management, is Deep Archive and Glacier the right place for your data, or is S3 Standard the right place for your data? Similar conversations can be had about, if I have a Linux workload, is EFS the right place? And if I have a Windows workload for the same data, how do I make that happen? And those are conversations that we're actively having right now, because getting the data to where it needs to be is part of the tool set, or hopefully not tool set that you don't have to worry about. You just have to specify what's important to you. So we can have those conversations as well if you have applications needing it. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, we're doing migration of all of our applications into Amazon over probably the next year, starting in January. Some of them on a small scale, we did some POCs and re-architected them and moved them. But on the larger scale, we're going to be moving, maybe a couple thousand VMs with the help of Accenture, and it's going to be more of a lift and shift. A lot of the applications, they use a NAS and an SFTP interface with a product called Tumbleweed, and we were kind of leaving that out of the migration until I'm seeing these new offerings that I think would enable us to sort of just move that data up into S3 and EFS, and then just point the applications and the users as well to those data stores. Does that seem reasonable?
It seems very reasonable, and we need to dive deeper into the specifics of your workloads and use cases. But what I said earlier around the simplicity of transfer for SFTP is a solution I would strongly encourage that you look at if you have an SFTP workflow today, because what Asa and team have built is truly super simple, and it's by and large worry-free. You really just through a few clicks of the console can stand up your domain name and start with your standard clients that you use today, start using SFTP on an infrastructure that you don't have to worry about, with all of your data landing in your bucket, and you can use that data any way you want. using all of the integrations that S3 has today. And again, the data is moving back and forth between your clients and AWS, so it's a pretty simple solution. So I would encourage you to engage it.
Part of it was the separation between what would go into S3 and what would go into EFS, because since the product presents this storage as sort of a NAS, as a network file system to the applications, but it presents the same structures to users via SFTP. So do I have to make the choice of, if I want to present it as the SFTP interface, that it has to go in the S3 bucket, and then, if it has to be mounted by the application, like as an NFS mount, I mean, I wouldn't want to copy it again into EFS.
Exactly. So
that's the part that I'd have to think about.
Yeah, so let's have that conversation. It sounds like a very interesting use case.
Hi, Wayne. Question on the FSx product. Is the product, can we leverage our existing Active Directory domain, or do we have to use?
Yes, you can. So we can set up a one-way trust with an existing AD environment and leverage your AD in that fashion.
Got it. So follow up to that, there's no way to join it to my on-premise Active Directory?
We use AWS managed directory and managed Active Directory, and Active Directory is sometimes an interesting process to understand how to get it all to happen. So I'd probably want to sit down with you and understand your specific auth needs to figure out if the current implementations meet them, and if not, what we need to do to make it work.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay.
So maybe as a follow-up to the previous question. So when I provision the FXS file system, and it requires the AD managed by AWS, that means that I have to pay also for this AD, right? That's about $48 a month or something like that?
Yeah, I can't speak to the price, but you don't have to stand up a full AD environment if you have your own AD environment to make that work, to set up the one-way trust. There's several different variants, one which is relatively inexpensive, but again, I don't know the exact cost, so I would have to go look to answer that question directly.
I have two questions. The first one is for duplicating permissions from the on-prem environment on migration. Do you have any plans for how that would work?
So specifically, are you talking about using one of the transfer services to move a POSIX file, POSIX permissions up into
Windows file permissions up into FSx.
Okay, so let's take that offline with Asa. I don't know that detail.
Okay.
I apologize for not having it in my cache.
My other question was, we have a number of Windows file systems distributed globally that we replicate the same data to all these other sites to get it close to their facilities. And there's similar services already in AWS. Is there anything like this for FSx?
So what are you using today to do that distribution?
Tunity RepliWeb R1.
Okay. Again, let's have that conversation. I want to make sure that I don't promise you something that's not true and not hold back anything that is true.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Another question on the FXS for Windows. What is the limit for number of files within a file system?
Because the solution is built on Windows Server using the file server capability within Windows Server, any of the limits that exist within that platform are exactly the same with this platform.
Well, you support file systems up to 64 terabytes. NTFS supports 256, so it's smaller.
I do know that we're supporting the maximum amount of storage per server. We also support out of the gate DFS namespace, DFS-R. So you do have the ability to build a DFS-based tree to get beyond the 64 terabytes under a single namespace.
Yeah, but the single file system size is smaller than what NTFS supports. So you're saying that the limit for the files on the file system is the same as defined by Microsoft?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, it seems like we might be at the end of our questions. That was a fantastic set. So thank you all for coming today. Really appreciate your time, appreciate your input on the services that we've delivered, and from the input that I received today, it looks like on the features and capabilities we'll probably be developing for next year. So thank you very much. Enjoy replay tonight. Party responsibly, but party as hard as you can. So have fun. Thank you very much.